As the squad car rolled past our house just outside the projects of Milwaukee one summer afternoon, I clenched my hand into a tight fist. My friends and I had been hanging out in front of the yard, and I was in a rebellious mood. It was 1969. The previous year, it seemed our nation was changing at breakneck speed. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot dead outside his room at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. Robert Kennedy was murdered in Los Angeles. Apollo 8 was the first manned spacecraft to orbit the moon. Fictional Star Trek character Enterprise Captain James Kirk kissed Lieutenant Uhura in America's first televised interracial kiss, and riots broke out at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Also, 2 black American athletes made history at the Summer Olympics after winning gold and bronze medals in the 200-meter race. As our national anthem played, Tommy Smith and John Carlos stood on the podium, shocking the world with heads bowed and black-gloved fists raised high in the air to protest discrimination against black people back home. As they left the podium, the crowd booed, but Smith didn't back down. "We are black and we are proud of being black," he said. "Black America will understand what we did tonight." We did. Watching those Olympic Games about 2,000 miles away in Milwaukee, we knew inherently that there was something wrong with America. The raised fist had become the universal symbol of black solidarity. That's why when the police car got in front of my house at 39th and Call Avenue, I thrust my fist into the air and planted my feet into the ground. Black pride, black power. You aren't welcomed here, my raised fist conveyed to the police officers. At least that's what I wanted them to understand. The cops apparently didn't get the message. Instead of being intimidated, they suddenly stopped their car. 2 officers got out and began walking over to me. The grins on my friends' faces faded. Out of respect, I lowered my arm, walked to the policeman, and looked down at my shoes. But just as the police began to open their mouths to question me, my worst nightmare came true. The front door of my house creaked behind me, and out came my father, David Clarke Sr. He squinted in the afternoon sun as he assessed the situation, and my heart nearly stopped beating. My dad, the Ranger. My father joined the U.S. Army when he was 16, just 3 years older than I was when I raised my fist in defiance. He was assigned to a tank battalion in Fort Knox, Kentucky, but he really wanted to be a paratrooper. Ranger training hadn't been offered to black soldiers before then, but he was able to go to Fort Benning, Georgia, to train with the 2nd Ranger Infantry Company, the Army's first, last, and only all-black Rangers. Since he was the only person in the Rangers to come from a tank battalion, they called him Tank. When war broke out in Korea, UN forces pushed the North Korean army as far north as the Yalu River. But when Chinese troops poured over the border to help the North Koreans, America realized the South Koreans might face defeat if they didn't fully utilize the skills of these black rangers. Could black rangers be elite? There were many differing opinions on that, but the Army needed them. Consequently, members of the 2nd Ranger Infantry Company had 2 very divided lives. Stateside, they were black soldiers, living under the integrity of segregation. In combat, however, they were well-respected members of a top-notch fighting force. Though the Army was the last military branch to comply with Harry S. Truman's 1948 executive order committing the government to integrating the armed services, the inefficiencies of separate hospitals or aid stations were unaffordable. Combat troops of all ethnicities were mixed together. On March 23, 1951, the 2nd Ranger Infantry Company loaded onto a plane headed to Monsigny for a jump. One black ranger, as he prepared to make history, observed, "It took the Chinese to integrate the American Army." Buffalo soldiers, that's what they called them. Though there are a few stories floating around about the origin of the nickname, apparently the Cheyenne saw black soldiers fighting in the plains back in 1870 and compared their curly hair and color to those of buffaloes. In World War I, black soldiers adopted the nickname and wore a shoulder patch of a solitary black buffalo to indicate their division. In 1942, they even somehow got a live buffalo as a mascot. By the time my dad was in the Army, the term was a sign of respect. Embracing the name helped the soldiers declare, "We are Rangers, and we carry the tradition of earlier Buffalo soldiers